All right, let's look at this one, Hametic Renaissance. This Afrocentric who kind of looks like Steve Erkel. Um, and people like a lot of his work probably because of that. He doesn't come across as being so ethnic, and he actually pronounces words and tries to use big ones. He'll try to use a big one or two in here too, but now he's changed his name to Nateru, and to avoid it because his name was Hametic Renaissance, and of course, Hamitic, Hamitic people aren't even um, Negroid. They were the Caucasians that lived around the Mediterranean, and it's even in like the dictionaries and everything, and all the way back. So it never really had to do with Negroids, although they used it against Negroids for the slavery and to justify the fact that one was supposed to be the slave of another one, as it said whenever Noah cursed Canaan, which that'd be Canaanites anyhow. But so he cursed Canaan, and of course, somebody would be ignorant to believe that Noah, in a drunken rage, could actually cause a curse that would happen onto somebody. But of course, it was a setup in the Bible for later, whenever they went against those wicked Canaanites and caused genocide to steal their land. Because if you remember, they were a nomadic tent people. But let's get off of that and let's see what this guy says, and we'll just shred that ass a little apart.
Ancient Egyptians, Africans, or Mediterraneans? I realize that this is a question that has puzzled many for a long time due to a lot of misconceptions that people have about ancient Egypt, whether or not this is an African country or a Mediterranean country. Well, truth be told, Egypt is an African country. Um, Although the country is geographically speaking is within close proximity of the Mediterranean Sea, it is not a Mediterranean country in the sense.
Well, that's a foolish thing to say because it connects to the delta and spreads out wide, and that's where more than one third of the population always lived from the earliest times through the Hyksos through the end, and then now today it seems to be a high population area. So they consider themselves to be a Mediterranean civilization that pokes into the edge of Africa because the Mediterranean is a big hoop and it just hoops down into here. Now you keep going around the Mediterranean, you run into Libya, and that's Caucasians, and you run over into Berbers, and Amazigh, and those are all Caucasians too. Now you keep going, you run into a desert blockade, and if you try to go south of that area is the Sahara Desert. Sub-Saharans, the people that are trying to promote this, of course, only came from there, and they have no attachments whatsoever to these people. But and a funny statement he puts in there, there's this big confusion on, there's no confusion on who they were and who they weren't. They hated Negroids the whole way through. They called them vile and wretched and troglodytes, and it means primitive, unaware, cave-dwelling people. So you can't say that they really had any affiliation to him at all, but he'll try to make some connections and watch him fail.
That certain centralist groups would like to have you believe that it is.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to biology or ethnicity, were the ancient Egyptians Mediterranean in the sense that did they belong to a stock that was similar to the founders of Greek civilization or the founders of Roman civilization? Well, the answer is no. For one reason, the Greeks make no mention of having any kind of kinship or consanguinity with ancient Egyptians.
Not true. When you read a lot of the old Greek poets and writers and everything, how they had come down and spoken to them repeatedly, and they were told about the story of Atlantis and that they were part of the same people and all this type of stuff that they had only forgotten because of been washed away. So that's just hilarious for them to try to say that. What else is he going to try to be with?
Nor could they understand ancient Egyptian language, which oftentimes led to misinterpretations of ancient Egyptian beliefs and religion. Uh,
Does he not know that the Greeks were hanging out with them way back when and through the Hyksos age, way back when, way back before Alexander the Great ever came through, and that on later than that, that they had connections with each other. And it's amazing that he doesn't know this fact, or he's just going to try to blatantly ignore it or say the opposite of truth.
And then there's a lot that, ethnically speaking, the ancient.
So look at the pale skinned woman here who doesn't have to work, and so her skin gets pale versus all the workers that are shown as pale. And they show you here that he's got leopard skins, and he starts trying to equate all these things to him. Well, leopard skins go all the way to Nimrod and all the way up through there, and the Greeks and the Aegis, and they have lion skins and things. You can't try to put some bullshit like that on there, but he's going to. Listen.
Egyptians and the Greeks did not share in common with each other. That happened to do with the fact that these were two different races of people.
There he goes with a big flip. That it has to do with the fact that they were two different races, and the other is somehow the black people they hate.
So then, if the ancient Egyptians don't share anything in common, at least closely, with people,
then why does he show lyres and instruments and stuff that Negroids didn't show up with until thousands of years later? How foolish is he to show things like this? I mean, this just, oh, that's a good one. He keeps doing it though. Watch him flip flop.
What do they share in common with sub-Saharan Africans? And
so now he's going to try to tell you what they compare to sub-Saharan Africans. Now listen close to this gigantic list that he has, but he first wants to insinuate visually here that it has to do with wrestling. That perhaps there's this idea that Greeks didn't wrestle and nobody else wrestled at all, but only Negroes ever wrestled, which is kind of odd because Nuba wrestling that they had in Egypt was telling you directly how to overcome Negroids in hand-to-hand combat. But I digress. Listen to his big list here.
Is this proof of a shared ancestry or genealogy, I guess you could say? And the answer to that question is basically there are quite a number of things that sub-Saharan Africans share in common with ancient Egyptians.
Like having blonde hair. Oh my God, he picks a shitty picture, doesn't he?
Everything from material culture.
They have crocodiles, so that's it. They have material culture, and then look at these ethnics here that are actually wearing white people clothes that have been given to them by foreign aid, and he's going to be like, yeah, see, they share stuff.
To beliefs, to just certain
So now Egyptians wear a two-pronged hat that's made of an ostrich feather, and he just showed you that blacks have one. Now, he hasn't really spoken that, but he's visually trying to project that to you. It'll fail on him, though.
Customs that both of the people share, Egyptians and then all of the various tribes or ethnic groups of sub-Saharan Africa. Again, you'll find that the ancient Egyptians wore things like leopard skins.
Pale lady.
They slept on objects, which they dedicated a hieroglyph to, such as headrest.
Now, that's been totally debunked, and I believe it's 7 Phoenician 7 that show that headrest are a newer thing for them. It's a mocking type situation, and sure, you can mock somebody else and do it. So here's one for you. Black people are Greek. Why? Well, because the Greeks started using pillows instead of something hard like this to put your head on, and everybody in the world used pillows. So now that you use a pillow, you're whitey. No, that would be silly. Let's continue with what? Hold on, look at this giant list that he's got. Let's check this giant list out.
They observe new moons, and they
Lunar calendar is a calendar based upon the monthly cycles of the moon's phases, Sidonic months, in contrast to solar calendars, based on the solar year. So the most commonly used calendar, the Gregorian calendar, is a solar calendar system that originally evolved out of a lunar calendar system. How terrible for him. So a purely lunar calendar is also distinguished from a lunisolar calendar whose lunar months are brought into alignment with the solar year through some process of intercalation. Intercalation is like when we use leap years now, but what it used to be back then, was they the Hebrews, as an example, they would have a festival that lasted for 11 days. And so, see, it takes 11 days to catch up right here. 11 days for you to catch up if you use lunar calendars and stuff. And so they ended at a harvest time, which was September. So September 1st to the 11th. And that was the reason for September 11th, anyhow, by the days. But so they share no affinity. They don't do new moons and calendars. Well, let's look at this right here. That'll show you that. So people do these festivals, religious holidays and everything, such as Ramadan, Islamic calendar, the Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese. Hold on, who's missing off this list? Mongolian New Year's, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, and Mongolian calendars have this. The Neptali New Year calendar, Mid-Autumn Festival, Chuseok, Chinese and Korean calendars have this. Lokathrong, Thai calendars, Sunwar, Hindu calendars, Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew calendar is based on whenever it has to hit a full moon. They run off ancient moon calendars, and it's been known for a long time that most people had an ancient moon calendar. It changed along through time. Sumerians had a lunar calendar a long time ago, but that got lost with the Akkadians, and then it got reestablished back in at the time of Ra, but they still ended up being one day off because of them not being able to figure for leap year and stuff. So this whole idea that lunar calendars, I mean, what a joke. So let's just go back to what else this idiot might.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head here a variety of different.
Hold on, he just tried to. Okay, so he's tried to equate ostrich feathers, and I've got something for that in a minute. He tried to do headdress. That's been totally debunked before. Now he's talking about new moons, and let's see what else he can come up with.
They observe new moons,
right?
And they. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, and they. I'm trying to remember, and they. I'm trying to remember off the top.
Well, do you even study this stuff? You should have a list.
Variety of different things that they shared in common with sub-Saharan Africans, which is proof that they did have shared ancestry. Another one of those things would be wearing ostrich
Here we go.
feathers in the hair
Flip-flop
during ceremonial occasions. I have noted in the reliefs of both Egyptians and during ceremonial occasions in sub-Saharan Africa, parts of sub-Saharan Africa, that ostrich feathers are normally worn during these occasions.
Okay. Boy, there's a bird down there with pretty feathers, and just seems pretty normal and everything. Later, you can have Negroids mock somebody that they saw doing that. Let's continue.
Now, right off the bat, I've already pointed out several things that distinguishes Egypt as a nation, as a culture, and as a race of people from those of the Mediterranean. You obviously don't find customs like wearing ostrich feathers in the hair during ceremonial occasions in Italy or Greece.
Well, maybe you don't find them exactly in Italy and Greece because they don't have ostriches there. Let's look at Libya. So here we have ancient Libyans right here, and it's talking about the Berbers. Right now they were barbaric. That's where you get that name from, because they wouldn't learn the Greek language and stuff. But funny how he says they have no connections of any of these white people or anything to it. whenever you can connect the Libyan people to the Grecian people also, right? And it's by linguistics in their name alone. But let's see what one of these guys looks like. I'll be damned. It looks like he's got a redhead beard. It looks like he's Joseph's coat of many colors. It looks like he's got tattoos on him, which is unique somewhat, although some Egyptians have tattoos. Oh, there's a link there, and it doesn't even work on dark negroid skin. It only works modern days to people that are lighter skinned, where you can barely see them sometimes. Get some good sun, you don't. By the way, here is a cross, and if you haven't found it yet, there's a lock, a side lock. You see this? Side lock? And then, what's that? Those are ostrich feathers. How terrible for him and his ideals. Now, here's Herodotus' old map that they had, and it shows an oddity here where Libya is this whole area above the Sahara, basically. And sure, the Phoenicians take over Cyrene and Carthage, of course, and so on. But here lies the Atlas Mountains, and in the old times, they used to think, if you'll look, there's not even any sub-Saharan Africa listed or even shown. It doesn't exist. They know nothing of it. And they think that the Nile curls around and runs off the Atlas Mountains, and the snow that comes off there somehow causes the giant deluge of the Nile. This is what they thought back then. And if you look at one of my videos I did recently on Atlantis, it shows the same map, and there's this place called Atlantis right here, which we know is a primordial sea area, and there's even some skeletons of whales that are out there, like 320 kilometers inland. Makes no sense unless you have a giant tidal wave perhaps come from out here in the ocean and swamp this whole area and kill a bunch of people off in primordial time, and they came over into this area here. And that really makes sense when you find out the Sumerians were over here, and whenever it flooded, they came over here like Abraham says he did. But that's another story altogether. Well, let's go back to this idiot.
There, as far as I know, is no recorded evidence of any observance of new moons. In Italy or Greece, you don't have any such objects like headrests found in Italy or Greece, nor do you find amulets like the manat or the soul washer necklace that's worn in Ghana, in Italy or Greece. So going back to E.A. Wallace Budge, who I draw a lot of my, as far as ethnographic and ethnological research from.
It's terrible that he throws that out there, because Wallace Budge got debunked years and years ago, but on most of what he thought. But he was the one that found Ginger, the pre-Ghibelline mummy, in the first place. And when you hear Budge talk about Africans and North Africans, he's talking about all the Caucasians that lived in North Africa, and the Libyans, like you just saw there with the red hair and things on them, and the Phoenicians that had red hair and blonde-haired people. And indeed, there's a lot of Egyptians, mummies that we find with the red and blonde hair, and these people are all the same, connective to each other. Sure, these guys are more tan for living on the equator, and during a primordial time, some people were like, these people are all related, but they're a little more tan than each other. Now, Negroids use that slightly more tan. See, they're black. And it's like, no, they're not. In fact, what's a Hamite? Hamites, from the biblical Ham, is a historical term in ethnology, linguistics, for a division of the Caucasian race. It was applied to the Berber, Cushitic, and Egyptian branches of the Afro-Asiatic language family, which form the Semitic branch, thus formerly labeled Hamo-Semitic. However, since the three Hamitic branches have not been shown to form an exclusive monophyletic, that's a constant, a unit of their own, separate from other Afro-Asiatic languages, linguistics no longer use the term in this sense. Each of these branches is instead now regarded as independent subgroup of the larger Afro-Asiatic, and Afro-Asiatic is actually up here. where you're seeing Hamites and Afro-Asiatic is Asia and this. It has nothing to do with the languages that are here in brown. So beginning in the 19th century, scholars generally classified the Hametic race as a subgroup of the Caucasian race along with the Semitic race, thus grouping the non-Semitic populations of North Africa and the Horn of Africa, which the Horn is way out here on the point, people. A lot of people, when I talk to, they think this is the Horn. This is Cape. The Horn is out here on the point, okay? And so, including the ancient Egyptians, bam, they're Hamitic for sure. So, because that's how you have Moses being able to blend in with these people, is that Moses, whose parents came from Ur in Sumeria, Abraham came from Ur, puts this all together to where, yep, it's the same people. Okay, so anyhow, according to the Hamitic theory, this Hamitic race was superior to or more advanced than Negroid populations of sub-Saharan Africa. So if they found some Ethiopian blacks that were admixed, and before genealogy and really was understood in DNA, they said, wow, these black people got mixed somehow and they were part of it and everything. Well, now we know from DNA that Negroids have a separate origin and stuff, so it doesn't have to do the same thing. It's not accepted anymore. Anyhow, this theory asserted that virtually all significant achievements in African history were the work of Hamites who had migrated into Central Africa as pastoralists, bringing new customs, languages, technology, administrative skills with them. In the early 20th century, theoretical models of Hamitic language and Hamitic races were intertwined. This nomenclature gradually fell out of favor between the 1960s and 1980s. So really, just one or two generations ago, people quit saying that it was Caucasians too and allowed Negroids to start thinking that it was including them, which it did include them back in the slave trade, for them to say, well, you said you were, God said you were supposed to be the servants of servants, so you're going to be, that's a slave. And so they justified it out of that. Now, these are old Islamic slave traders, and that began 900 years before the Americas were even found, and it went on for all of that time. Only the reason they didn't have any diaspora during that time is because they castrated all the males, they say due to their penchant of raping people openly, and so they castrated all the males and made them into eunuchs. And then by their own documents themselves say that they disposed of them after usage to keep from feeding them or housing them further. So that caused them to not ever have as much diaspora as like they're enjoying now in America. But anyhow, so this happened between the 1960s and 1980s in a large part due to its perceived association with colonial paternalism. So, Jew daddy, basically. The populations of Hamitic ancestors stock are now more commonly known as Caucasoids. Okay, so
The ancient Egyptians are strongly African in the sense that a lot of their beliefs, their customs, and of course their language, their overall behavior, psychology, is related to that of sub-Saharan Africans.
really,
Not people, well, I should say, related to that of sub-Saharan Africans strongly. To a lesser extent, people of the Near East and the Mediterranean. So there is a lot of misconception.
there is, especially in the black population, where they don't seem to realize that this is just a tan Caucasian, showing that he's even tanner because he's a man in action, doing things whenever the farmers are a little bit darker. And look at that blonde-haired guy. In your own damn videos, you can't keep from hitting off and just blatantly showing stuff directly to people. There's a blonde-haired guy here. There's a blonde-haired guy here. There's a red-headed guy there. And yet you come off with this crap. It's just hilarious. Terribly hilarious.
Surrounding ancient Egypt as a culture, as a race of people, and a civilization, and a country, and a nation. And that is because
Look at these pictures.
the connections
Yes.
that have been noted and made by several
Nuba
anthropologists.
wrestling.
One of those was E.A. Walsh Budge, another was Henry Frankfurt.
Boy, he
Back
loves
in the
Budge.
20th century, have been basically omitted from academia's current understanding of ancient Egypt today, simply because they know that the links between sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt exist, and it's
Oh, it's because they wrestle. Well, I can show you WWE wrestling right now, and then 1,000 Greek urns showing them wrestling. And of course, you're not going to be able to make that connection. You're going to say it has to do with black people who now modernly do a wrestling type thing. This Nuba wrestling, again, was how to subdue and wrestle hand to hand combat Negroids, vile Nubian troglodytes.
instead of trying to erase it, they just simply have ignored it altogether. But for anybody who has taken
Now, ignored it. They did not ignore it in any way, shape, or form. They've taken and built upon that and then figured out the truth to it and how it's slight a variation of not the truth. And now DNA and genetics show that it is true. Let's continue with Froggy here.
any time at all to study sub-Saharan African cultures and compare them to ancient Egyptian culture, you do find very strong resemblances and similarities between ancient Egyptians and sub-Saharan Africans.
No, you don't. So these are earliest dynasties, third, fourth, fifth dynasty reserve heads, and you really can't say that has anything to do with Negroids or has a resemblance to them. I don't know what he's trying to say. Sure, they have iconic views of people and stuff, but no, these are the reserve heads that actually mean something, that are actually done for a reason. I mean, hey, let's look at a few more here. How about the goddess Isis? Why would we worship the pale, blue-eyed chick? That make any sense to anybody? Sure, it's 13th dynasty, but it shows a perpetualness. It doesn't show like, oh, there's a sneaky Negroid that came in that no one noticed and thought they were different at all. Blonde-haired guys. That's just... There's your blonde-haired guy. Blonde-haired guy. Blonde-haired guy. What are they doing? What is Whitey Cracker doing in Egypt? Or better yet, why would a black man think that he's from Egypt whenever he's from sub-Saharan Africa, far west, a people known on the planet to be the most primitive on the planet, that live in dung huts, have no notions of God whatsoever, and they're not Hamites of the Bible either. That's Caucasians, and these are Caucasians too. Look at these people. Right. I think that here you can see what a Negroid would look like. And look, here's a Negroid over here. Don't know if he's catching in there. Oh, he's not quite catching in the side of it. But sure enough, there's a black guy over there. And here, right here. And here's a guy the color of the Egyptian that he's smiting. Now, how does that come off? Well, let's see. Here's a tan guy riding around in a chariot. Oh, he's over here running over vile Nubian troglodytes. That's amazing. How can he continue his lies whenever this is in front of him? Things like the sandals of King Tut said that they're on there so that he can crush them even into the afterlife with every step. They've got a little rope around their neck. And look, there's a Libyan that's kind of blonde-haired. Isn't that odd? And what about that? The Semite guy's blonde-haired too. How freaky. Ancient scribes. Now, these are princes. That one's famous. Look at them blue eyes. Blue eyes. 5th dynasty. Look at them blue eyes. Blue eyes. 5th dynasty. Look into the eyes of an Egyptian. Let's continue with what Hambone Dung Hut says.
All right, coming to one final point before ending this video.
Oh, he's going to make more.
With a part 2, but just wanted to
He thinks he has info.
into the origin of this idea about ancient Egypt being a Caucasian civilization.
Ooh.
So we have to go back to 1895. There was an
Ooh.
Italian anthropologist by the name of Giuseppe Sergi.
Sergi,
He
yeah.
published a book in basically at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yep.
And it was called The Mediterranean Race. In this book, he basically laid out his theory,
and it was basically that all the Caucasians all the way around the Mediterranean had been there since primordial times and were variations on a theme. Let's see what he says about it.
His theory was that the populations of the Mediterranean essentially had their origin in Africa. His country of
not
choice
sub-Saharan
was Libya.
North African.
And
Libya.
he based this upon
Now Libya would be the light-skinned guys from a minute ago that had the tattoos and used the feathers just like them and had the side knots. Okay, and the ones that live right near them, right next door. You didn't have to cross a desert to do it, and of course you didn't have to fight your way through vile Nubian and troglodytes to even get down to West Africans that have no relation or genetic connection to these people whatsoever. But what's he going to say about Libyans?
Beliefs of that he found in Libya or that had been discovered in Libya.
Yeah, the reliefs.
And images that had been copied from these reliefs in Libya. And the reliefs basically were images of what was said to be the indigenous inhabitants of ancient Libya. These people,
white people, all around the Mediterranean, no Negroids.
People known as the Temahu. So Sergi basically said that the populations of the Mediterranean, which were divided into, the populations of the Mediterranean were descended from
Caucasians.
These Libyans.
Libyans. Side knot. Now, the juveniles keep a side knot, then they cut it off. They grow it out as a juvenile. They're cared for when this happens, and then whenever they get older, they cut it off, and it becomes wigs for other people. But now he said, now, did you hear him before? He said there's no sign that any of these white people use ostrich feathers, and then here they are using ostrich feathers. So, I mean, that's just foolish. Again. Let's continue.
Libyans belong to a branch of the Hamites, which he said that there was two branches of. There was a northwestern branch and there was an eastern branch. Now, the eastern branch contained the tribes such as the Watutsis, the Afar, Oromo, the Bija.
Certain ones that seem to have some Caucasian in them. Didn't look at all like sub-Saharans.
The Tebu, and the Berbers.
Now he's going to put the Berbers as that lady who's a later admix, and then what else does he say?
Etc. And so
etc. So now what he just did was mention black tribes that the guy mentioned that seemed to have some admix, and he left out the Maghreb, the Amazigh, the Carthaginian people, the Libyans themselves, and so on. I think that's just hilarious. Okay, let's continue.
Said that these Hamites, a term that he and scholars of his day had borrowed from the Bible, had traveled to Europe and basically formed the basis of Mediterranean ancestry.
Mediterraneans formed their own ancestry, and he noted it being a historian, twister of truth.
There, the Mediterranean race emerged, and then after a period of time, there was another sub-race that was to emerge from the Mediterraneans called the Nordics, or the Scandinavian type Caucasians of Northern Europe. Now, of course, Sergi's theory in today's world no longer has any credibility to it.
Actually, this whole Negro story
no longer has any credibility to it. No longer has has any credibility to it. No longer has any credibility to it.
At all.
One, because of the linguistic evidence. The ancient Egyptians did not speak Indo-European languages, but they did speak Afro-Ascetic languages, and those are two different language families altogether. Going back to the ethnographic and ethnological evidence, there doesn't seem to be any relationship genealogically or genetically between Mediterranean peoples and ancient Egyptians.
Well, that's just funny because this ancient genome study right here that we've got shows that all these people down here don't have anything to do with these people up here, and all these people up here had to do with Egypt. It's just odd that you would show something like that. I don't have to go through this whole paper for you if you want. I'll try to put it in the notes here, but this is whenever they did all the mummies from Absir El Melek, and it's from the Middle Kingdom all the way through. They thought that they would presumably see a big change, and they could watch genetically, and they would get a lot of information because they could see the ancient Egyptian versus when the Greeks came in, or when the Hyksos came in, and then later, whenever some sub-Saharan may come in from whenever the Nubians finally took over, then is there any Akkadian in there? And what about Greeks and Persians and then Romans at the end? Maybe we can watch that fall all through, and it'll give us a whole lot of information. And whenever they did it all, they found out it didn't even really change at all, and the sub-Saharan admix shows up much, much later. And so what does that let you know? Well, it shows you that they didn't have any sub-Saharan African stuff, and then they imported 6 to 7 million sub-Saharan slaves in North Africa, span over 1,250 years. Take that, America, and your 400. But again, those were all castrated and stuff, and so that's the reason they didn't get anything up. And they figured that what happened was Egyptian men marrying some Nubian women or so on may have clearly made the genetics show up to be much later. They don't have an affinity to them. It doesn't show up to be much of anything at all. They tell you through this whole thing here about how there's intermarriage of Romans and things through there, and you thought it would change it, but it really didn't. If you want to look at this whole article, you're damn well welcome to do so. It's nature.com, articles/incomes 15694, hashtag discussion is where we're at on this. But here's your genomic analysis right here. And they show you the grouping around the Egyptians and way the hell out here. Guess who's way the hell out here? Sub-Saharans. No affinity whatsoever with the earlier ones. Small percentage. Small percentage. Not even where you can go, oh, they had some mulatto. No. Small micro percentage. Let's go back to Hambone Dunghut.
Sergi's theory was just completely off, just completely wrong.
Really?
And
his theory shows now that was pretty much on.
Definitely in today's world serves a purpose because it gives you some type of idea into the scientific racism of the 20th century.
No, but this video right here gives you some of the anti-scientific reverse racism going on here in the 21st century by the people that just a few generations ago were domesticated from a pre-Stone Age level, illiterate, dung hut dwelling, cannibalistic tribe that believed in witch doctors and didn't even know about God or the rest of the world.
And 19th century. But nothing that he actually had come up with was even close to being accurate.
Actually, it was fairly accurate.
That's where the whole origin of the Caucasian Egypt originated. The theory itself.
Now, the origin of the Caucasian Egypt starts all the way back at pre-dynastic with Ginger, the blonde-haired curly mummy that your Budge guy you love so much found, and his comparison said it looked like the Greek statues with their curly blonde hair. Let's continue.
idea being that the populations of Southern Europe originated from Africa, and then of course
North African Caucasians. He keeps trying to show you some sub-Saharan bullshit from some primitives. Whenever they talked about Africa, there are whites to this day living 24/7 right around the equator there and around the Mediterranean, and they always have, they always will.
you had Finlander's Petrie, who had his own idea about the
What did he
origins of the
say?
Egyptian from Africa. And then, of course, you had Finlander's Petrie,
What?
who had
What?
Finlander's Petrie,
Where?
Finlander's Petrie, who had his
Finlanders?
own idea about the
Flanders Petrie?
Egyptians being.
That's okay. He calls them Hoaxos, and they're actually the Hyksos, but that's okay.
Bringing pharaonic culture and civilization
I'm surprised that
into Africa.
Erkel can pull it off.
Fortunately for us, Petrie, like Sergi, his theory doesn't hold water either.
When you show blonde-haired people helping to do work and no negroids but tan guys, and the only negroids are on the wall being hated by these people, and on the wall it clearly says something like negroids aren't even allowed into Egypt,